Healthcare organizations are built on two things that absolutely dominate LinkedIn: mission and people. Mission driven content, the story of why your organization exists, outperforms product content by 2 to 3 times across every executive we've studied. It's not even close. And people centric stories, team spotlights, patient impact, culture, the humans behind the work, outperform company announcements every single time. Healthcare companies have both of these in abundance, more than tech, more than financial services, more than any other industry I've worked with, and almost none of them are using it. That's today's episode. 4 healthcare leaders I've worked with, 4 different segments, from a 50-person medical device startup to a 3,000-person healthcare services company. Real before and after data, and the case that healthcare's biggest untapped advantage isn't a product, a platform, or a partnership. It's the leaders who aren't showing up. Welcome to Cultivating Executive Presence. I'm Justin Nassiri. I run a company called Executive Presence. We help leaders build visibility on LinkedIn. We've worked with over 50 healthcare executives and we worked with nearly 400 executives, and a significant portion of our work is in healthcare: software, services, devices, health tech, from imaging platforms to therapy to hearing care to medical devices. I've seen the inside of a lot of healthcare organizations at this point, and I've noticed something working with healthcare leaders that I don't see in other industries, something that honestly frustrates me, because these organizations are sitting on a gold mine of content and they don't even know it. Think about it. Every healthcare company has a mission that resonates on a human level: improving lives, making care accessible, solving problems that affect real families. That's not something you have to manufacture for LinkedIn. You don't need a copywriter to invent a compelling story. The story is the reason the company exists. When a healthcare CEO posts about why accessible care matters, that's not content marketing, that's the truth, and the audience can feel the difference. And every healthcare company is people-centric in a way that most industries are not. The clinicians who show up every day to care for patients, the researchers working on breakthroughs, the nurses who go above and beyond, the patients whose lives change because of your work. These are the stories that stop the scroll on LinkedIn. There's the stories that build trust. They're the stories that make someone think, I want to work with those people. But instead of telling those stories, most healthcare leaders default to resharing press releases and company announcements: a new product cleared by the FDA, a conference booth, a reshared company blog post, which across every executive we've studied is the lowest performing content category. It's not even close. I was working with a healthcare CEO recently who told me, we post on the news about our company page. Our news on the company page. That's our social strategy. And I said, that's not a strategy, that's a filing cabinet. Nobody builds trust by filing press releases. Trust is built when a human being shares something real. The mission and the people are right there. You're just not using them. And that's what I want to change with today's episode. Today, I'm going to walk through 4 healthcare executives I've worked with, from a 50-person medical device startup to a 3,000-person healthcare services company. I'll show you the real data, the before and after numbers, the content that works and the content that doesn't. And I think by the end, you'll see that healthcare has an unfair advantage on LinkedIn that almost no one is using. Before the case studies, let me set the stage for why this matters specifically in healthcare right now, because this isn't just a generic LinkedIn talk. Healthcare has unique dynamics that make this both more urgent and more rewarding than in other industries. First, trust is the ultimate currency in healthcare. Whether you're selling to hospital systems, recruiting clinicians, raising capital, or partnering with payers, trust determines who wins. And trust is increasingly shaped before the first meeting happens. People look you up, they check LinkedIn, they ask ChatGPT about you, they form opinions before you even know they're evaluating you. If they find nothing, that's not neutral. In healthcare especially, silence creates doubt. If you're selling a medical device and the physician can't find evidence that you're a credible expert in the space, that's a problem. If you're a health tech company trying to partner with the hospital system and the CIO has never heard of your CEO, that's friction you don't need. If you're trying to recruit a nurse or a practitioner and they look up your chief clinical officer and find tumbleweeds, they're going to the competitor whose leaders are visible. Second, the number one constraint in healthcare is talent, not demand. Everyone in this industry knows this. There aren't enough clinicians, there aren't enough engineers who want to work in healthcare. There aren't enough experienced executives. And the best candidates research the leadership team before they'll even take the call. They go to LinkedIn, they look up the CEO, the CMO, the chief clinical officer, and if they find nothing, or worse, if they find a profile that hasn't been updated since 2019, that shapes their perception before you ever have a conversation. Third, your competitors' leaders are getting louder. I see this across every healthcare segment we work in. The leadership team that owns the narrative wins the contract, the clinician, and the partnership. If your competitor's CEO is posting consistently about their mission, their clinical outcomes, their team, and you're posting nothing, you're starting every conversation at a disadvantage. So the question isn't whether visibility matters in healthcare. The question is why so few healthcare leaders are doing anything about it. And the answer, in my experience, is the same three mistakes I see across every industry, but with a healthcare twist. Mistake number one, I'll post when we have news. Sporadic FDA clearances, funding announcements, and conference appearances that get 12 likes. The algorithm rewards consistency, not events. By the time you have news, you have no audience to share it with. Mistake number two, our marketing team handles social. Company pages earn a fraction of the reach of personal profiles. 59% of decision makers prefer content from individual creators over brands. A hospital system buyer wants to hear from your CEO or your chief medical officer, not your company logo. A clinician researching your organization wants to see the person they'd be reporting to, not a brand page. The personal profile is where trust is built. Mistake number three, I don't have time. This is the one I hear the most in healthcare, and I understand it. Healthcare leaders are stretched thin. You're managing clinical operations, regulatory compliance, board meetings, fundraising. The calendar is full. But the reframe is simple. You don't have time not to do this. Your competitors' leaders are becoming the recognized voices in your space while you stay invisible. And the actual commitment is 30 minutes per month. That's a voice capture call where a team extracts your ideas and creates content that sounds exactly like you. Every leader in the case studies I'm about to share will tell you the same thing. They don't write their own posts. First case study, the exit. I've worked with the CEO of a healthcare software company for the last 2 years. About 850 employees. He's backed by PE firms with over $100 billion in combined assets under management. He has deep domain expertise in healthcare IT. He was brought in by the sponsors to scale the company towards an exit, and he has virtually no digital presence. When we started, he had posted 5 times in the last year with minimal traction. If you Googled him, you'd find a LinkedIn profile and maybe a company bio. That's it. A CEO perfectly positioned for a landmark exit, but with absolutely no visible narrative to support the story. Think about that, what that means in healthcare M&A. When a Fortune 500 acquirer is doing due diligence on a healthcare software company, they're not just evaluating the technology, they're not just looking at the revenue numbers and customer retention rates. They're evaluating the leadership. Can the CEO retain the health system relationships post-close? Does the market trust this leader? Will the CTO at the health system take this CEO's call after the acquisition is announced? If they Google the CEO and find nothing, that is a risk factor. If they Google the CEO and find 2 years of thoughtful healthcare IT content, that is a trust signal. So here's what we did. Over 18 months, we built a consistent publishing cadence. Started slow, few posts a month, found his voice, found the content mix that worked for his audience, hospital executives, health system CTOs, healthcare IT decision makers. The content wasn't about his product. It was about his perspective. It was about his perspective on where healthcare IT is going, his point of view on interoperability, on clinical workflows, and how technology should serve clinicians rather than burden them. The kind of perspective that makes a health system CTO think, this person understands my world. 18 months later, he's posting 20 times a month. That's 240 posts a year. His top posts are pulling in 400 plus likes. He went from invisible to a recognized thought leader in healthcare IT. The people in his industry started to know who he was before they met him. Then the company was acquired by a Fortune 500 company for over $2 billion. Now, did LinkedIn cause the acquisition? Of course not. The product was strong, the team was strong, the PE sponsors did their job, but here's what I want you to think about. When the acquisition was announced, it reached his entire industry because 2 years of consistent publishing had built the audience first. The announcement didn't create the audience was waiting for the announcement. I see this all the time in healthcare. A CEO comes to us right before a fundraise or an acquisition. They want the world to notice, but you cannot build an audience at the moment you need one. Visibility isn't built at the moment of exit. It's built in the 24 months before anyone knows an exit is coming. And if you're thinking, well, I'm not planning an exit, that's exactly the point. You don't know when you'll need the audience. You don't know when the acquisition will come. You don't know when the opportunity will materialize. The only thing you can control is whether the audience is there when it does. Second case study, the recruiter. And if the first case study was about exit, this one hits the pain point that I think every healthcare leader in this audience feels every day. Talent. I worked with the chief clinical officer at a national healthcare services company for nearly 4 years. This is our longest running healthcare engagement. 3,000 employees. They operate in a therapeutic environment where there's a nationwide shortage of qualified clinicians and therapists. If you're in healthcare services, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The demand for services is enormous. The supply of qualified clinicians is not keeping up. And every company in the space is competing for the same shrinking talent pool. Traditional recruiting channels were failing. Job postings on Indeed and LinkedIn jobs weren't working. Recruiters were expensive and slow. Referral programs had plateaued. The talent market was brutal, and the constraints on the company's growth wasn't demand. They had plenty of families waiting for services. The constraint was talent. So they tried something different. Instead of posting more job listings, they made the leader visible. They bet that if the chief clinical officer became a recognized voice in the community, the right clinicians would come to them. Posting frequency went up 619%, from about 2 posts a month to 12 posts a month over a 47-month program. That's nearly 4 years of consistent publishing. Average engagement more than doubled, from 25 likes per post to 54. Now, I want you to think about what 540 posts over 4 years represents. That's not a campaign. That's not a marketing initiative with a start date and an end date. That is a sustained strategic commitment to being visible. And the consistency is what made it work. The algorithm rewarded the consistency. The audience grew because of the consistency. The recruiting results came because of the consistency. And the outcome that matters, headcount grew 26%, from about 2,300 employees to nearly 3,000 during an industry-wide talent crisis. While every competitor was struggling to fill the same roles, let me put that in context. They added roughly 600 clinicians in a market where clinician shortages were making national news. But here's the data that really changed my thinking. We analyzed every post by category, and the results were clear. The most liked posts weren't "we're hiring," they weren't "great company," they weren't job descriptions with a link to the careers page. They were personal leadership stories about why this leader got into healthcare, what drives them, what they believe about clinical care, how they think about leading clinicians through difficult moments, the human stories. And company promotion, the category most healthcare leaders default to, was the lowest performing category, not by a little. Personal and leadership content drove twice the engagement. Let me say that again. The content that feels most natural to healthcare leaders, the stories about why this work matters, outperform the content that most leaders actually post. Think about that in the context of healthcare recruiting. A clinician is considering 2 job offers. They go to LinkedIn at one company, the chief clinical officer has a rich body of content about their clinical philosophy, their leadership values, what it's like to work there. At the other company, the CCO hasn't posted in a year. Which company feels more trustworthy? Which leader feels more invested in their team? LinkedIn became this company's best recruiting billboard, and the executive didn't have to ask anyone to apply. The visibility attracted the right people organically. If you're in healthcare and talent is your bottleneck, and for most of you listening, it is, this case study should change how you think about LinkedIn. Third case study, the Evangelist. And this is the case study that most clearly demonstrates the healthcare advantage I opened this episode with. I've worked with the CEO of a global healthcare company for about 18 months, 1,000 employees across 8 countries, on a mission to make care accessible to everyone, to destigmatize an underserved condition and make treatment dramatically easier. Now, this is a category with real stigma attached to it. Many people who could benefit from the treatment don't seek it out because of how society perceives the condition. So the mission isn't just about selling a product, it's about changing how people think about care. It's about normalizing treatment. It's about reaching people who've been told by society that they should just live with the problem. That's an incredibly powerful mission, and it's exactly the kind of story that resonates on LinkedIn, but nobody outside the company was hearing it. When we started, the CEO was posting about twice a month, inconsistently, no strategy, no narrative arc, a press release here, a company milestone there, the kind of sporadic company-focused posting that most healthcare leaders default to. In under a year, posting frequency went up 3.5 times, from about 2 posts a month to 7. We built 82 original posts from scratch, and the transformation wasn't just volume, it was the content mix. And here's where the healthcare advantage shows up most clearly. His team and culture posts, stories about the people behind the mission, the team he's built, what it's like to work there, outperformed every other content category. Not by a little, by a lot. His top posts tell the story. Founder origin story about falling in love with the problem, 92 likes. The company's anniversary, 187 likes. The millionth patient served, 171 likes. A culture story about a team member's unconventional path into the company, 164 likes. A reflection on what hybrid work means for a global healthcare team, 158 likes. Notice what's not on that list. Product specs, feature comparisons, technical capabilities, pricing, integration details. None of the things most healthcare leaders think they should be posting about. The best healthcare content never leads with the product, it leads with the mission. Why accessible care matters, why this work matters, why the team shows up every day and lets the audience connect the dots. When a prospective customer or partner reads a post about the millionth patient served, they don't need a product demo. They already trust the mission. The product conversation becomes easier because the trust was built first. This is what I mean when I say healthcare has a natural advantage on LinkedIn. The mission is the content. The people are the content. You don't have to manufacture it. You just have to start telling the story. And this CEO did it by going from 2 posts a month to 7, a manageable cadence that compounded over time. Last case study, the Innovator, and I saved this one for last because it answers a question I get all the time. Does this only work for big companies? The first 3 case studies were companies with 850 to 3,000 employees, significant organizations with real resources. So you might be thinking, great, this works if you have 1,000 employees and a marketing team, but what about a startup? What about a founder who's wearing every hat? This case study answers that. I've worked with the founder of a medical device startup for about 7 months, around 50 employees. He's a former special operations veteran who sustained a spinal cord injury in combat. And that experience didn't just change his life, it gave him his next mission. He founded a company that builds devices to improve outcomes for patients with similar conditions. The personal experience became the company. Now, this founder has the most compelling personal story in our entire client base. When he posts about his journey, the injury, the recovery, the moments with his family, the transition from military to medical devices, his content regularly gets thousands of likes. The first time his son saw him stand and walk, over 3,000 likes. His injury anniversary, nearly 3,000 likes. These are extraordinary numbers that most healthcare executives would never dream of. But here's the problem. He was posting sporadically. Some months, 13 posts, then months of silence. 3 months with nothing, then a burst of activity. He had the engagement. When he showed up, people responded. He didn't have the consistency. And without consistency, you cannot build the compound effect. Each burst of posting started the flywheel from scratch instead of building on the momentum from the last one. This is actually a really common pattern I see with healthcare founders who have compelling personal stories. They post when inspiration strikes, get great engagement, and then disappear for weeks. The engagement feels validating in the moment, but the inconsistency means the audience never really builds. The algorithm forgets you. The connections you made fade. Since we started working together about 7 months ago, posting frequency went from 2 posts a month to 6 sustained. Not bursts, sustained. That's a checks increase. And average likes went up 21%. Not because the content changed dramatically, but because consistency let the algorithm work in his favor. When you post regularly, LinkedIn's algorithm starts showing your content to more people. When you disappear for 3 months, the algorithm forgets you exist. But the data point that matters most is this: his personal and resilient stories, content about his military service, his spinal cord injury, his journey from combat to medical devices, averaged 441 likes. That's 2.5 times his business content. 2.5 times. The posts about building the company, launching the product, hitting milestones, those averaged about 200 likes. The posts about why he started the company, what the injury taught him, the personal moments, 441 likes. And this is the healthcare insight again. His why is his most powerful asset. The injury that led to the problem that led to the company that improves patients' lives. The narrative is incredibly powerful on LinkedIn, and it took consistency to unlock the compounding. Sporadic posting kept resetting the flywheel. Consistent posting let it build. This is a 50-person company seeing the same compound effect as a 3,000-person company, a medical device startup with the same framework as a national healthcare services organization. The playbook doesn't require scale, it requires consistency. And that's true whether you have 50 employees or 3,000. 4 case studies. Let me pull the thread because across all 4, a healthcare-specific insight emerged that I think is the most important takeaway from this episode. First, mission outperforms product by 2 to 3 times. Every healthcare leader's highest performing content told the story of why they exist, not what they sell. The Exit CEO's best content was industry perspective, not product demos. The Evangelist's best content was the founding story. The Innovator's best content was personal resilience. None of them led with product, and this makes intuitive sense in healthcare. The mission resonates on a human level that product features never will. Second, people content is the #1 recruiting tool in an industry where talent is the bottleneck. The Recruiter proved this at scale. 26% headcount growth. Team spotlights and culture stories outperformed "we're hiring" posts in every case. The Evangelist showed the same pattern. Team and culture content was his highest performing category. In healthcare, your people are the differentiator, and the candidates you're trying to hire want to see the people they'd be working with, not a company logo. I think about this a lot. Every healthcare company posts job listings. Every healthcare company has a careers page, but the companies whose leaders share personal stories about why they got into healthcare, what they believe about patient care, what it's really like to work there, those are the companies that attract talent organically. The job listing isn't a transaction. The leadership narrative is a relationship. Third, the playbook scales from 50 to 3,000. This is important because a lot of healthcare leaders assume this only works for large organizations with big marketing teams. It doesn't. A 50-person medical device startup and a 3,000-person healthcare services company saw the same compound curve with the same framework. Don't need a big team or a big budget. You need 30 minutes a week and the right content mix. Here's the framework. 4 content categories, and I'm going to explain each one with healthcare-specific examples because the framework comes alive when you see how it applies to your world. Industry thought leadership, about 40%. Your credibility base, your point of view on where healthcare is going. For a health system CEO, this might be perspectives on value-based care or the shift to outpatient settings or how AI is changing clinical workflow. For a medtech founder, it might be regulatory trends or unmet clinical needs. For a healthcare leader, it might be interoperability or patient engagement. This is what establishes you as someone worth listening to. It's necessary, but across every executive we've studied, it's never the highest performing category. It's the foundation. Leadership and career journey, 30%. The trust builder, why you got into healthcare, the moment you realized this was your calling, the hardest decision you've had to make as a leader, what you learned from a failure. This is where people start to feel like they know you. And in healthcare, these stories are often deeply personal. The clinician who became a CEO, the patient experience that inspired a company, the family member whose illness changed everything. These stories resonate on a human level that industry analysis never will. Company promotion, 20%. Team wins, milestones, culture, new hires, FDA clearances, conference wins, patient milestones. These are the recruiting ads that don't look like recruiting ads. They're important for showing momentum, but they're the lowest performing category, and they're what most healthcare leaders default to. The trap is thinking that your company news is what people want to see. It's not. It's what you want to say. There's a difference. Work adjacent or personal, 10%. Your values, your family, your life and interests outside the organization. A weekend volunteering, a lesson from your kids, reflection on gratitude. The smallest category, but the reach multiplier. Personal content drives 2.5 times the reach of industry content. It's the content that makes everything else travel further. And here's what makes healthcare unique. You have a natural advantage in 3 of these 4 categories. Your mission fuels industry thought leadership. Your people fuel leadership and career journey. Your patients' lives fuel work adjacent personal. The only category that takes effort is company promotion. The only category that takes effort is company promotion, and it's the lowest performer anyway. And it all compounds. This is the part I need to be honest with you about because it's also the part that makes the most healthcare leaders quit. In healthcare, you understand compound effects intuitively. Clinical outcomes compound over time. Patient relationships compound. Trust with healthcare systems compounds. Trust with health system compounds. A referral network compounds. You don't expect a new physician relationship to generate revenue in month 1. You understand that relationships build over time and eventually becomes one of your most valuable assets. LinkedIn works exactly the same way. And yet most healthcare leaders expect results in month 1 and quit in month 3. Different starting points, different timelines, same curve across all 4 case studies. Months 1 through 3 feel like nothing is happening. Most leaders stop here. In healthcare, especially where everyone is already stretched thin, it's easy to deprioritize something that doesn't show results immediately. Months 4 through 6, you start hearing, I saw your post. Clinician mentions it in an interview. A health system buyer references something you wrote. Inbound starts to trickle. Months 6 through 12, it accelerates. Recruiting shifts. The narrative changes. The audience builds on itself. The recruiter's headcount started climbing in this phase. Year 2 and beyond, the flywheel spins. The exit CEO's audience was waiting for the acquisition announcement. The Evangelist team content was compounding quarter over quarter. The recruiter's headcount started climbing as clinicians found the company through LinkedIn before any recruiter called them. Every post lands harder as credibility accumulates. And here's something specific to healthcare. The relationships in this industry compound over years and decades. A hospital system buyer who follows your CEO's content for 2 years isn't just a lead, they're a warm relationship. A clinician who's been reading your chief clinical officer's perspective doesn't just apply for a job. They arrive already aligned with your clinical philosophy. All 4 healthcare case studies show the same curve. The flywheel takes time, but it doesn't stop. And in healthcare, where the payoff from trust and reputation is measured in decades, not quarters, the compound effect is even more powerful than in other industries. So let me land the plane. If you're a healthcare leader listening to this, here's what I want you to take away. You are sitting on 2 of the most powerful content advantages on LinkedIn, mission and people. And you're probably not using either one. A healthcare software CEO built an audience in 18 months and sold for $2 billion. Chief Clinical Officer grew headcount 26% during the worst clinician talent crisis in a generation by telling personal leadership stories, not posting job listings. A healthcare CEO built trust at scale by evangelizing his mission instead of his product. Team and culture content outperformed everything else. And a 50-person medical device founder proved the playbook works at any size. Personal resilience stories averaged 2.5 times his business content. Same framework. 4 healthcare segments from 50 employees to 3,000. And here's what I want to leave you with. Healthcare leaders don't need to become influencers. They don't need to go viral. They don't need to dance on camera or post memes. None of the four leaders I just described did any of that. They showed up consistently and told the story of why their work matters. The mission, the people, the impact. That's not marketing, that's leadership. And it's leadership that every healthcare organization is uniquely built to deliver. The advantage is already there. The question is whether you'll use it. Here's the exercise I'd encourage you to do this week. Pick one leader on your team, Google them, ask ChatGPT about them, check their LinkedIn. When was their last original post? If someone researching your organization found that profile, would they be more or less likely to trust your company? If the answer is not much would come up, that is the gap. And now you've seen the data on what happens when healthcare leaders close it. The best time to start was a year ago. The second best time is this week. That's not marketing, that's leadership. Thank you for listening. I'm Justin Asiri, and this is Cultivating Executive Presence.